Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've actually just filmed 2 reviews before this one, so my voice is getting a little scratchy and hoarse. If I crack along the way, then laugh away, but we're working with what we got here. This is the end of my workday, and it is now nighttime, and we're getting some videos shot. So, this is the Microtech Hawk Auto, and it is time for me to do my full review on it. I have definitely carried and used this knife enough to feel comfortable speaking about it from experience. Before I jump in, I did get this knife from my friends over at Rivers Edge Cutlery. As always, purchasing this knife from them was super easy, super smooth. I talk about Rivers Edge Cutlery a lot because I like them as people. They've become friends. They have made all of my knife transactions easy and very good. And they've also supported the channel in a number of cool ways, both through giveaways and through posting my videos on their website and all kinds of really, really cool stuff. So they're my favorite retailer for a reason. I just always want to shout them out when I'm reviewing a knife that I got from them, because people ask me often where I recommend that they go to purchase a knife, and Rec is at the top of the list. So this is a knife that I bought a little bit on a whim. I had been curious about it for quite a while, really since it was re-released or came back out. And it's the knife for like 12, 13-year-old me. And I talked about that in my first impressions. Every now and then, I let myself get a knife that speaks to young Jake. that me then would be proud of me now for spending my adult money on. This is one of those knives that I would have thought was so cool when I was a teenager, and I still think it's very, very cool now. And this knife was purchased because of its cool factor. I mean, look at this thing. It is just wild. So this is obviously a side opening automatic. There's our button for deployment. Let's talk a little bit about the construction on this guy, and then I'll kind of go through my typical points of review and just talk about this knife and what my experience has been with it. So, blade steel on this guy is CTS XHP. They have been released in a couple of different blade steels at this point. It's just kind of a matter of timing as to which one, it seems, they'll be using at the moment at Microtech on it, but they've all been good blade steels from what I've seen. I like XHP. I'm happy that this one's in it. That's fine by me. The handle scale material is aluminum, and then if you can see in these patches, they use their kind of rubberized, almost like ray skin material. I guess that's probably not the way to put it, but it's not like sandpapery, but it's gritty for sure, and it's got like this slightly kind of rubbery softness to it. It's a different type of grip than you get from G10 or micarta or a lot of other materials. So I actually kind of like these inserts. I feel like they feel good and they suit the nature of the knife, and they don't look bad. I think they look pretty cool. So aluminum with rubbery stuff. And then we have on this side the pocket clip, which is a very functional pocket clip I actually found. I do prefer deep carry clips in general. I'm not going to say I wouldn't prefer that on here, but this pocket clip worked well, and as like tactical knives go, I feel like this was a pretty good pocket clip compared to a lot of other tactical knives that I've experienced. So XHP, aluminum. I think the pocket clip is titanium. I guess it could be steel. I don't know. You can, I'm sure, find out on Microtech's website or one of the major retailers. Anyway, so this one is serial number 738. It was manufactured in February of 2020, and yeah, it is. Its crowning feature, what everyone notices about it immediately, is that big hawksbill blade. Hawksbill. Is there supposed to be an S on there? I don't know. Hawksbills. That's what we're going with on this hawksbill's blade. So it has a lot of curve to it, as you can see, and that makes for quite a dramatic tip. This knife is definitely designed to be a tactical knife, as most Microtechs are, to be fair. I would consider them a tactical knife company. One of the most tactical knife companies that exists in the current market. I've owned a few Microtechs at this point, and I will say I have yet to get a Microtech that had poor fit and finish, or a bad action, or really any quality control issues. I've had good experiences with Microtechs. They're not cheap. This one was $380, $379, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm almost certain that's what I paid for it. So kind of expensive, but US made, good materials, and good warranty. So they have a lot going for them in that way. But this blade is the knife. That's what any knife is, frankly, is a blade. But it really, it's a wild shape. And so as you can see, we have our typical Microtech kind of billboarding, but on this stone wash, it's not a big issue. And unlike the SOCOM Elite Signature series that had the giant rooster talons, as I kept calling them, this one, because it's just a regular production Microtech, just has the Microtech logo and serial number and all that. It's got these really dramatic holes drilled in. You got 5 holes there, which make it go faster and look cooler, and that's it. I guess maybe, with this being a tactical knife, maybe they serve as kind of like a blood groove, a little bit. I don't know for sure. Haven't tried that with it. Don't plan to either, but yeah, so it's got the holes. It's also interesting that they not only did such a dramatic hawksbill, but it has this harpoon in it as well. So you can see the kind of flat extends following the line of the handle, and then you've got this little uptick here. And part of that, I think, is aesthetic, but another part of it I have found just gives me this awesome like saber grip point of reference to extend my thumb all the way right to that spot, and it feels like a really confident positioning for a saber grip. There's no jimping up here. I love that. There is a little bit back here on the, I guess, frame, or the scales right up here, but the fact that it's not jimped right here I really appreciate, because I find so many tactical knives, they put all the jimping in the world on them, and they're really aggressive about the jimping, and I don't like jimping. That's part of why oftentimes tactical knives don't agree with me. But here, none of this jimping that does exist on the knife is really bothersome to me. So well done to Microtech on that one. So yeah, the blade is crazy. It's thick behind the edge, for sure. Especially like out toward the tip, it gets real thick. But in this kind of main slicing portion, what would normally be like belly on a lot of knives, but here is obviously just kind of some curve. I've found this knife slices quite well, and a lot of it is that it came with a really, really good edge, and the edge is still immaculate on it. It's a good edge. But as I've put this through sheets of cardboard, and I've cut all of my typical EDC stuff with it, it's done really well. I've had this knife in pocket way more times than I typically would by the time I do a full review. Part of that is the timing to be able to sit down and film this, but also I've just really liked carrying this knife, which shocked me. I thought this knife was going to be way more of a novelty than it ended up being, but I like having this knife in my pocket, and I found that cutting with it, this blade, for most of my EDC cutting tasks, if not all of them, has at least excelled, or has at least been acceptable, but oftentimes has kind of excelled. I like hawksbill blades for a lot of the cutting that I do. And for a long time, I feel like I looked at them as being just tactical and very impractical for me. But I find that on the right knife, it's actually quite practical. So I've liked that. Let's talk about carry for a second. So the pocket clip, as I mentioned, I'm okay with. It's not overly tight, it's not overly loose. I get the right amount of retention without it snagging in pocket. You can see we do have these sections where we've got the kind of grip tapey, rubbery stuff, and on the back we have that up here, but if you notice under the pocket clip, there's none of that. There's no texture right under the pocket clip, which is great, because if there was, this knife would probably be much less pleasant to put in and out of pocket. It's definitely a long profile this way, and it's not exactly narrow this way, but The taper that exists on the handle I find helps it a lot, because you'll notice it's thin down here. It gets much thicker up here toward the pivot. And it's very similar in construction in that way to the SOCOM. And when I reviewed the SOCOM Elite, I found that I did not really like carrying it. Partially because it had this taper. Now, the miracle here is that they put the clip in the right spot. This knife carries tip up. On the SOCOM, it carries tip down. And so having the clip up at the top here where it's fattest on the SOCOM is a bummer, because you have the fat part of the knife right at the opening of your pocket where it's least comfortable, and you've got the material kind of pressing the knife against your leg. On this, with the fat part down in my pocket and the thin part up here at the top, it carries like, it's got like good carry ergos, if that makes sense. It carries smaller and slimmer than the top part of the knife is, because up here where you feel the carry the most, or at least I do, it gets nice and thin, and the profile is good. Microtech has this knack for putting glass breakers on everything, and I would prefer to have glass breakers on nothing, but here they use a nice tiny little glass breaker, and it's not super bothersome. I forget that it's there most of the time. It's not like the glass breakers they put on some of their OTFs, which are like the size of the entire knife. This is just nice and kind of subdued and out of the way, and so the way it carries has been really, really good. And on top of that, it's lighter than I was expecting it to be. This is a thick, thick blade, but the scales are just this really kind of cool design, and you can see they're like, there's these holes, almost look like they're drilled out. I guess they'd be drilled if it was an integral, but it's two aluminum slabs that are screwed together, but it creates this cool like kind of spine look back there, and it's really nice. It's lightweight. The blade definitely, it definitely feels blade heavy in the hand, but I mean, look at that. Yeah. I feel like it feels cooler that it's blade heavy because it's this blade that's got all that weight. And folded, it feels definitely lighter than I was expecting it to. In fact, I got this knife before I got my Stitch Auto, and my Stitch Auto is noticeably heavier than it. I even went back and looked, and I was like, are these steel scales? Because this knife feels so much lighter, I wondered if it could be also aluminum. It is also aluminum, but this is just a heavier construction in general. And so it's interesting holding them side by side. The Hawk just feels noticeably lighter, but it's still a big, giant Microtech with a thick blade stock, and it's an out-the-side auto, and it's, I in my head, before having these knives in person, would have guessed that they'd be closer in weight. And I don't know what their actual weights are. I'm just going off of feel here, but I can tell the way that they handle and carry that this knife just feels lighter to me. Maybe part of that is also that it's got these inserts. Maybe these rubberized inserts take down the weight a little bit compared to just having it be more solid aluminum. I don't know, but I like the way this knife carries. So we've talked about carry, we've talked about cutting. Let's talk about ergos for a second. I touched on it with the way the harpoon is up here, but on top of that, the way that this handle is shaped, obviously we've got kind of a curve. The whole knife is really like a crescent. But the way that the handle fits into my hand with this finger groove, and then with following the finger groove, the fact that it's just one primary groove, and then we've got this nice kind of swooping flat here, and then on the back it's a nice relatively neutral shape. It fits in my hand really, really well. Again, better than I was expecting it to. In so many ways, I expected this knife to just be kind of like a cool novelty purchase that would be fun to check out and I'd enjoy looking at, and then I'd probably flip because, like, what am I really going to do with it? But I found step by step that, like, I like the way it goes in my hand. I like the way it cuts. I like the way it carries. Obviously, being an auto, talk about action real quick, it's a fun out-the-side auto. It fires hard. It doesn't fire quite as hard as my Stitch, but it fires hard. You can feel the kind of shock of it reverberate through as it deploys and locks up, and it's solid. I don't have any side to side or front to back. It's great. It's a really well constructed auto with a great action that I like having in my pocket, I like having in my hand, I like playing with, and I like cutting with. It's like definitely not what I was expecting to find with this knife. And I'm really glad that I gave it the shot, because it's impressed me on just about every characteristic that I can reasonably judge a knife on. And so, I don't know. I don't think I can see myself letting go of this knife any time in the immediate future, because I just like it too much. I enjoy having it around, and I enjoy all of the, like I said, things I can judge a knife on about it. That sentence probably didn't make any sense. You get what I'm saying. So yeah, this knife started as a like, let's get this crazy thing and see what it's about, and it'll be cool for Instagram pictures and to share on the channel. And it's turned into a knife that I actually really, really like. What's interesting is the SOCOM Elite was a knife that so many people told me I would love and have stood behind as one of their favorite knives, and I see a lot of the merits behind that knife. It's definitely slicier, thinner behind the edge by a mile, and it's got a lot of great things going for it. But that knife didn't click for me. I didn't find that I loved the SOCOM Elite. I really only kind of liked it. It just wasn't the knife for me. And so what's crazy is that this knife I legitimately like so much more than I did the SOCOM Elite. And on paper, I just never would have guessed that. And I just find I like each aspect of this knife more than I did that one. And it takes a lot of the things that a lot of people say are great about the SOCOM, and in my opinion just kind of dials up the fun. And it's also tip up, which is a big thing. I haven't tried the automatic SOCOM Elite. I've only tried the manual ones, so maybe I'd like the auto more, but I don't love the way that knife carries, being tipped down and being fat at the top and skinny at the bottom. I like it this way. If there was a tip up SOCOM Elite auto and it felt like this, but with that blade in it, I'd probably really, really like that knife. But this knife just works for me. It's odd how much it's clicked for me, because I just genuinely wasn't expecting it to do so. But if this is a knife that you've been curious about, like I was for a while before getting it, and you think it's cool and it speaks to you like it did for me, then if my opinion means anything to you, I have found that this knife is way more usable than I gave it credit for before trying it out. And it's just, for me, it has clicked. So I guess that'll be my full review of it. And I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks again to Rivers Edge Cutlery for being awesome. I will link to Rivers Edge Cutlery down below. If this knife is still available on their site when I do, I'll link to it as well. But I'll at least put a link to their site and to their Instagram and to their YouTube. They're putting out videos pretty regularly on their YouTube channel now, which is great to see as well. The guys over there are awesome. So thanks to them. And yeah, this is the Microtech Hawk Auto. And it kind of gets my stamp of approval, which is weird because I didn't think it would. But man, is it cool, and it really works for me. So there you have it. The Hawk Auto in all its glory. The claw. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you on the next one.